The Korg M1, released in 1988, is a digital synthesizer workstation, or colloquially known as a rompler. It's kind of like a sampler, except you can't add your own samples and you can't modify any of the samples that are in there because it's ROM, it's read-only memory, so it's rompler, not sampler. You get it. While you think you may not be familiar with the M1, you actually are, as long as you recognize these sounds. Sounds like this. Sounds like this. And even this. And this. But for some of you who may have grown up watching a certain Scholastic show back in the day, you may recognize that last sound from something else. Most of what I played just there is either a single or double sound in the M1's program mode. The program mode acts very similarly to other two oscillator synths, where you can have two different source sounds and you can mix them in different volumes. You can change the filter settings, envelope settings for filter, amplitude, and pitch to create your sound. It doesn't have to just be one sample. But the M1 has this thing called Combi Mode, where you can mix up to 8 programs together for a potential total of 16 sounds. And it kicks ass. So what's the big deal with the M1 anyway? It sounds kind of dated, probably to some of you, right? I mean, it doesn't to me, but the M1's dated sound can really be attributed to a few different things, I think. One of them being the quality of samples, because this was 1988 after all, and sample storage was expensive, even back then. The mix of different sounds that were actually sampled, because some of them were kind of in vogue at the time, late 80s, as well as just the familiarity with some of the sounds because they were used so much. I mean, come on, you hear this? This is the house piano. Right? So you hear enough of these sounds a lot and people will go, oh, that's the M1. That is what the M1 does. It is this thing, this specific thing. It's not really meant for anything else. So a lot of that association kind of makes it seem like the M1 is just useful for one or two things. Something very similar happened to the DX7 and the D50 that came out before the M1. The M1 contains samples of acoustic instruments, synth sounds, synth waveforms, effect sounds, and even drums. Any of these sounds can be mixed together to form a new, different, or bigger sound, or a chorus sound. However you want to mix these sounds together, you can do that with pretty much all the sounds that are in here. Also, many of the samples in the M1 actually have looping regions at the very last cycle of the waveform. I suspect the reason for this is because in order to fit all the samples on there, they had to be very short. And so in order to extend them in a way, they would add these loops at the very end of the sound so that you could extend them with decay, sustain, release, and all of that stuff. And you can actually hear it in sounds like this. Now, it might be a little hard to hear, but listen to what the piano sample does. It's actually looping right at the very end. Now, because samples in the M1, like this piano one, don't actually ring out like a full piano sound would, we have to use envelopes in order to add that decay. So instead of getting this, we could do this. But the fact that we have that looping region at the end actually gives us a little bit of power because we can do stuff like this. Now we have a pseudo piano pad type thing because we've changed the attack of the sound. Now let's go into Combi Mode. When you first open up M1 Legacy, you are in Combi Mode by default, and the preset that loads is something called Film Score, and Film Score is this. This sound is a mix of a choir, tubular bells, strings, and a piano. A lot of the combis that come with the M1 are pretty much this. They are a mix of different instruments, but discernible instruments that you can point out, like bells, choirs, pianos, basses, strings, guitars, and things like that. And that's fine and all because there are stacks of sounds, and sometimes those are interesting, but Combi Mode can do so much more than that if you dare to think outside the box. What if instead of using Combi Mode to just mix pre-made programs, you build up a totally new sound? Maybe you use different waveforms to make a totally new piano-like sound. Maybe a bigger piano sound. One cool thing about Combi Mode is that it's not just a program mixer, it can be a program extender. Think about it like your program mode is your two basic sounds. You can mix two piano sounds together, two waveforms together, right? But let's say that's not enough. Let's say you want something that can add on to the sound in other ways. Now you can have multiple programs here in the M1, and you can set it so that each of these parts will build up your sound into something bigger, like I have here with the bigger piano sound. Now for this sound here, I actually have 4 different parts, and they're all using very similar sounds to make what I called here the bigger piano. Now, in the M1, you've got actually quite a few different piano sounds. You can see here in the multi-sound and multi-sound 2, the browser, I have set piano 2. There are a number of different piano sounds. Here's the usual one, right? You hear that. Then you have piano 2, and I think these are different piano 2 sounds. I don't know why they're both called piano 2. God, I don't know what I'm playing. Right? So you've got all these different sounds here. And I've mixed, let's solo this, I've mixed piano 2 with piano 1. This first sound, I have it set to the loudest. The second sound, I have it quite quiet. So if I were to listen to the second sound only, oh, it's actually quite quiet. So what I have here is I have it acting as sort of like a foundation for the first sound to give it a little bit more of a fundamental tone. And that's why it's so quiet and why it's so heavily filtered. Over here in the second sound, I have 2 other piano sounds, piano 3 and piano 2, playing together. And both of these sounds are pretty much just another normal piano. They have the same envelope shapes for the filter and the amplifier so that they both decay like a piano should. And over here in the third sound, I have 2 different waveforms. I have soft EP and I have clav. These sounds are not meant to sound like an electric piano and a clavinet. I'm actually using these waveforms to give a different dimension to the sound. The first sound is quite a mellow sound. And the second sound is quite bright, but I do have it filtered a little bit, and I have it quieter. If I were to listen to that on its own, we can actually still hear a lot of those other frequencies in the usual clav sample in here, just not as bright, because I don't want it to be as bright for this. And the last part, for piano part 4 that I have here, I'm actually using a French horn for one of them, because this one is also a very deep, mellow sound. Now, the main point that I wanted to do with at least this sound is show that some of the piano samples in the M1 already are a little bit thin, just a little bit, and so I wanted to bolster up the sound by adding in other sounds. And so one of my ideas was to add in other piano sounds to kind of make it wider a little bit, because there is a little bit of natural detuning since not all the samples are that perfect, except for the sustain part because they have to be in tune. But I also wanted to add a little bit of brightness in some areas and some low-end sound in other areas, and that's what the EP and the French horn samples are kind of meant to do. So the overall sound, instead of it being this, is more like this. Now with this sound, I've actually mixed different elements of different waveforms and stuff to build this overall sound. None of the sounds that are in here in the sound, except for maybe the 2 choir pads down here, are actually pre-made sounds or are actually meant to be kind of their own instruments, if that makes sense. So the first sound is the main part of the sound. It's this spirit pad. And that's comprised of a synth wave, which is this, another synth wave, MV wave, and together they sound like this. Very vocal-like kind of sound. But then down here, I actually have 2 different sounds making up a new bell-like sound. This is for the attack. Now the second sound uses a bell wave and a different digital wave, and I have them tuned about a fifth apart, slightly detuned, and the second oscillator is delayed a little bit. Now both of these sounds together actually form a new bell sound that doesn't exist as a single sample in the Korg M1, which is what makes both program mode and Combi mode really interesting. You can have different synth ingredients to build up to a newer sound, and you might be able to make something a little bit more interesting and maybe, dare I say it, sound like something that doesn't really come from the M1, kind of like this sound. Well, maybe with the exception of the choirs. The choirs are pretty recognizable as being from the M1, but the rest of the sound, totally new, I think, anyway. Also, the third sound is basically a bell tines sound. It's a DX7-like sound. And that uses one of the sounds from the DX7. That's this. That's DX7 right there. I have no idea what that's a sample of, but both of those sounds together make the main sort of keys part of this sound. And then, of course, you've got the 2 choir sounds that I alluded to earlier. They're panned slightly apart, and over in the MIDI, they are slightly offset in tuning as well. So that's really cool. Now, another obvious choice with Combi Mode is pads, and boy can you exploit that. Now, do you remember what I showed about the looping regions before when I had the piano sound being played and then I moved the attack to slow it down and give it more of a pad-like sound? Well, we're going to revisit that with this sound called Dreamland. Now, this is a sound that I made a little while ago, and even though it only contains 2 programs, there's a total of 4 sounds in here. 2 of the sounds in this overall sound are acoustic and 2 are synthetic. In the first sound, we have woodwind, which sounds like this. And then we have piano 2 again. Over in the second program, we have reverse. And the second sound is vocals. Now, listening to these 2 sounds together, the piano and woodwind sound, that might come across as like a mix of kind of a classical symphonic type thing, right? Something maybe like this. But if we do something simple, like change the attack from something instantaneous to something a little bit longer, we can get something that sounds like this. Do you hear how it transforms a sound? Doesn't sound like you're listening to woodwinds or a piano anymore, does it? And of course, if I were to mix in the effects that I have here, as well as the second sound, actually, let's listen to the second sound on its own first. So one of those sounds is a vocal sound, and the other one is a synth sound that kind of has a built-in interval of a fifth, and so we get this sound. And it still sounds a little bit vocal, just a little bit, but both of these together transform into this very light, very ethereal, dreamland-like sound, which is why I named it that way. And sure, you could do sounds like that just using one program, but why would you stop there when you can just have more, you know? So Combi Mode isn't just a way to mix pre-made programs together to make a mishmash of instruments all playing at once. You can build up to new sounds using raw waveforms, other sounds to make pads that don't normally make pads. You can even make bigger sounds, kind of like this. Just be sure if you're doing something like this where you have pretty much the same sound in every program that you bring the volume way the hell down. You don't want to break your headphones over this because all of this can get quite loud if you were to play it all at once. Sounds all right. Let's go over to oscillator and we're going to tune it apart by 8. 10. 10. 10 sounds good. Now we're going to take this, copy, paste, 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 and paste. Over in the MIDI page, in the Combi mode, we're going to detune this apart even further. Let's say 6, let's say -4, let's say, actually, let's go a little bit more than that. -5, -10, +12, +15, -15, +20, to bring it down to like, actually, less than 10. And so far we have this. Ooh. Ooh. Did you hear that near the end? There was a kind of cool phasing thing going on at the end. Let me play that again. I just replayed Universe, a preset that I demoed earlier, and if we were to look at this sound, it's actually a deceptively simple sound, despite it sounding, you know, like this. It just uses two sounds, a choir sound, and this sound called lore, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think it's just a percussion loop of, like, kalimbas or marimbas or something. And what's actually going on here is we have a little bit of filtering going on, but we also have pitch envelope for the second sound. So it goes up and then it comes back down. And it makes a pretty interesting and dynamic sound. There's both texture and movement to the sound. And so if we can do something like that with one program, imagine what we can do with a Combi. Let's go do it. So here I am in Combi mode again, and I'm going to, instead of making programs before loading them into Combi, I am going to build everything within Combi mode. So go over here to oscillator, and I am going to turn on double sound because that is kind of the point of this. I'm going to change piano to something else. Let's say toy piano. I think we're going to do something interesting with that. And change the second sound to, I don't know, that. Maybe that. Maybe. Let's bring the loudness down just a little bit. Already have some detuning up. Cut off. Okay. Add some time to this. I think that might be all right for our first sound so far. Because I already have most of the ingredients for the pad set up already with this one sound, I'm going to copy this and paste it here just to save me time from going through the process of changing all of this again. And I'm just going to go in and change the sound to something else. Let's say Maybe that. Let's change the second sound to something else. Ooh, kind of like that. Okay, I don't have mod wheel assigned to anything just yet. I don't think I need to right now, but let's go over to the next sound. And I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I've added a little bit of a filter LFO to the first sound here. I'm going to do something similar to the amplitude of the second sound here. Except reverse. Maybe I'll match that with the oscillator, actually. Now I'm going to go over to the effects and put something in here that'll give it some more stereo spacing. So stereo tremolo, mod depth, mod speed, go down. There we go. There we go. Something like that, yeah. Let's add an effect to this, maybe chorus. Sure. And then we've got this. And I think that's my sound. I know I didn't go through all 8 programs, but at some point it is possible for you to do too much. So you do also have to know when to stop. And I think that is pretty decent for what I have right now. In this sound, you have different elements. You have the main part of the sound with a little bit of a noisy kind of texture to it. And then you have a second sound, which is a little bit brighter, and that also has a little bit of a texture that gives a little bit more movement because it's a sample of some like rattling sound. And then the third sound is more of a actual rhythm that goes stereo left to right and gives a different dimension of movement. That's a little bit more discrete and not as random as the sample in the second sound. So that and so much more can be done in Combi Mode. I barely even scratched the surface of the Performance tab here. Over in Performance, you can use these settings to do something. I actually, personally, have not really messed with this, but I'm sure that can do even more things to your sound than I could even cover so far. So yeah, the M1 isn't just a one-trick pony. You can use Combi Mode to expand your sound beyond what the programs already give you. And yeah, that is what makes Combi Mode so powerful. At this point, really, the only thing stopping you from doing stuff like this is your own creativity. So, go have fun. Go get creative. Bye. Oh, hang on. Almost forgot. Do you want some of the sounds that I demoed in this video? They're down there in the description. You can go to my Gumroad and download them for free. It's called Fantasy for Korg M1. It has programs and combis that I designed over the years. Some of them I demoed in this video, others I didn't, and you can use them for whatever you want, if you want them. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.